I discovered Keane like most people thanks to their breakthrough singles Everybody's Changing and Somewhere Only We Know. The band has been a mainstay in my collection and in regular rotation in my car or via my headphones for as long as I can remember. I've also been fortunate enough to see them twice live, and they have put on a brilliant show each time that I've seen them. The most memorable of which was last year when they performed their debut Hopes and Fears in its entirety as they were celebrating the 20th anniversary of it last year. The band itself have remained stable in their lineup since they were signed, with Tom Chaplin on the mic, one of my absolute favourite singers ever. Phenomenal singer. Keyboard player and principal songwriter Tim Rice-Oxley, the tasteful drumming of Richard Hughes, and Jesse Quinn on the bass, who toured with the band full time before being introduced as a permanent member back in 2012. The band themselves are unique in the sense that they have no guitarist in their lineup, and has been a regular comment by music journalists and fans alike, but they didn't stop them from making their mark. Since they burst onto the scene, they have created a discography over the last 21 years, which at the time of this recording is, while only 5 albums long at this moment in time, is full of hidden gems, and I will be your guide to go through them with you. And so on that note, let's rate some Keane albums. Cause and Effect. Released in 2019, this remains Keane's most recent release. The overarching theme of the album is Tim's divorce, the possible causes, the effects of how such an event shapes those impacted through everyone involved. It was also their first album in 7 years, following 2012's Strangeland, and the first from any Keane member, actually, since Tom Chaplin's debut solo album, The Wave, which in itself is an absolutely amazing album as well, if you haven't already heard it. Because of the subject matter throughout, it can come across as a little bit, a bit woe is me, woe is me. But so by the time you've got through the halfway point, it can feel a little bit wearing. But the songwriting and the arrangements match the themes absolutely perfectly. Tim doesn't hold back with the emotions, the pain. He's brutally honest with his own feelings and shortcomings, particularly as an often absent then husband and father, because of the lifestyle that he's adopted, being a full-time musician. The album itself is easily the one I come back to the least, which is why I put it in this position. It's certainly not a bad album, it certainly isn't, but it's just the one I come back to the least. The other four that came before it were simply more to my taste. It's just as simple as that. Personal highlights from the album include the opening track, You're Not Home, which is a really, really slow burner. Takes a while to get going, but it explodes towards the end, and it's a brilliant song. The slightly abstract Turn the Light On, which is actually a personal favourite of my wife. She really likes that song, and I happen to as well. The catchy and bittersweet The Way I Feel, which was actually I think it was the first single from that album which they released, and I think it's the penultimate track, Thread, which is a really lovely song as well. When it came out, I bought the deluxe copy, and it has a couple of very well orchestrated acoustic versions of some of the album tracks, such as Stupid Things, which I happen to prefer the acoustic version to the album version. And they also did an acoustic version of I'm Not Leaving. There's also, I think, a couple of bonus tracks. The New Golden Age especially is a brilliant song. I feel it very much merited a place within the album proper, but that was a decision that they obviously made. They felt it maybe didn't suit the album as a whole, but I personally felt it would have belonged there perfectly. If you lost touch with Keane after their mid-2000s heyday, it is definitely worth checking out this album, despite it being the bottom of the list. So yeah, check it out. Strangeland. At number 4, I have decided to place Keane's fourth album, Strangeland. Released in 2012, after a 4-year break, they came back to the airwaves with an album which was, of course, new, but also strangely familiar. Whilst not a concept album, its themes of change, growing up, the journey of relationships, and big city dreams, wanderlust, that kind of thing, is the main sort of theme throughout the album. If you were to put their first 2 albums in a blender, you would end up with something like this. The majority of the compositions have a delicate balance of the bright and slightly more optimistic sound that You Are Young, Silenced by the Night, Sovereign Like Cafe, and Day Will Come incorporate, whilst the darker elements are never too far away. They're always in the background, even on the slightly more uplifting songs, but they are more prominently featured on songs such as personal favourite Disconnected and Black Rain. The use of the distorted synthesizers adds to the intrigue and certainly gives me this feeling of foreboding throughout. Some of the stories told in the lyrics center around living in a small town but yearning for adventure and the dreams of the city life. It may be that the narrator either leaves or stays behind in the environment that they know and love. It is especially evident in the songs Neon River and the unfairly consigned to bonus track, Strangeland's title track, which is only available on the deluxe version. Why it doesn't rate higher than it does is because, as I mentioned earlier in the section, it does feel a little bit too familiar. Even when the first single from their album came out, which was Silenced by the Night, it did remind me too much of the previous sounds that they've explored before. It does feel like that a lot of the songs were ideas inspired by the early material, which certainly isn't a bad thing, but they have taken changes in direction regularly, and much more sort of obvious changes. And even with the album being as moving and honest as it is, it does feel rather safe to me, in my opinion. But as I said, a lot of the songs sort of journey on relationships and small town life and what have you. The band wear their identity on their sleeve on this album. I feel it's the album that I feel is their most personal, being that they're from East Sussex. A lot of the places feature throughout towns where they grew up, streets and locations like Sovereign Like Cafe, which is a real place, are core to the album. The album highlights for me are You Are Young, Disconnected, Sovereign Like Cafe, and Neon River, with the title track, of course, having to receive an honourable mention. As I mentioned, it was only available on the deluxe version, but the song itself is an absolutely amazing song. It is one of my absolute favourite Keane songs, and the fact it's a bonus track, and it's also the title track, which isn't even on the album, is a bit disappointing to me. I think if that track was on there, it would have rated higher, but the fact it isn't on there, it's only available on the deluxe, wasn't a smart move to me, in my opinion. But yeah, that finishes Strangeland. So yeah, on to album number 3 on the list. Perfect Symmetry. So, released in 2008, this is the biggest left turn that the band ever took, using a diverse array of synthesizers and other musical instruments to create a carnival of sound. This is made particularly clear in the opening track, Spiraling, and the Marmite track, Pretend That You're Alone. The piano that had become synonymous with the band's early days had, barring a couple of tracks, had essentially been phased out. The pianos have been replaced with retro synth leads and pads instead, creating this album which feels like it came out of a different time. It's got a very 80s vibe about it, which I absolutely love about it. It is an incredibly bold, ambitious album, made with the unbridled creativity from each member, without it sounding pretentious or unnecessary. Tom pushes himself even more than ever. I feel it's probably his best performance as far as an album goes from Keane. Tim is more playful with his playing, and Richard laying down some less straightforward grooves and fills, especially on the nearly 6-minute long Playing Along. And you can tell that the band had an awful lot of fun while recording this. So yeah, of course, this is how I feel about the album now, but I must say it wasn't always this way. I simply couldn't get to grips with the direction that they took on the album at the time when it came out. I was pining for the piano anthems that made me fall in love with the band in the first place. Because of that, I took a break from it for quite a while, but for some reason that I can't explain, it simply clicked with me one day. The experimentation is so welcome on this album, and a musical diversion that was probably due at some point in their career. Sometimes the well-worn path isn't necessarily the best route to take. Instead, to take plenty of left turns and to follow your instincts and go with what sounds good, rather than sort of taking too much time to think about what you want to do. You want bongos on the album? Yeah, why not? Brass? Sure, why not? Want a musical saw? Yeah, go for it. Guitars? Yes, there is even guitar on the album. Played tastefully, I must say, by our main man, Tom Chaplin. The standout songs for me are the title track, Perfect Symmetry, You Don't See Me, Again and Again, and Playing Along. It is definitely one to revisit if you haven't listened to it for a while. If you've never listened to it, be prepared to be surprised. Under the Iron Sea. Released on the 12th of June 2006. I'm saying the date specifically because that was my 15th birthday. I present to you in second place, Under the Iron Sea, a dark, mysterious, and almost nightmarish album in its ambience, the polar opposite to what they had to offer us in the early throes of their career. The pianos that were once dominant give way to more sparse arrangements, with dissonance and atmosphere being the main feature here. I must confess that it was because of these elements that was not really to my taste initially. I had been obsessed with the sound that had preceded this album, and the use of distorted piano and what I thought were really strange and unfamiliar sounds just simply put me off at the time, especially when I was introduced to the first single, Is It Any Wonder, which I think I first heard on 4Music. Um, the song itself as a choice of single is perfect. It certainly marks a very bold reinvention for the band, which had become synonymous, unfairly in my opinion, with being a piano ballad juggernaut. At the time, these new sounds were very jarring to me. I simply couldn't make sense of what they were trying to go for with the more abrasive sound. Me being at that time a 14-year-old kid, you could probably forgive if you'd become a fan because of the sound you fell in love with. However, it wasn't maybe until a year or so later where it really began to click for me, and I really started to then appreciate the album after taking a break. Don't get me wrong, it certainly isn't an artsy, pretentious, amelodic record at all. There are certainly hooks, catchy choruses, and beautiful melodies that will get stuck in your head throughout the album when you listen to it back to front. What makes this album so good is just how perfectly these contradictions are balanced. You got the opening track, Atlantic, the instrumental title track, Try Again, and the penultimate 6-minute track, Broken Toy, which show off these darker elements the most effectively. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got songs like Nothing in My Way, a personal favourite, Leaving So Soon, Put It Behind You, and Crystal Ball, which offer a more familiar sound, but still incorporating the newly favoured distortion on the piano and moodier soundscapes. So the personal favourites for me on this album are the aforementioned Leaving So Soon, which is one of my absolute favourite songs in their catalogue, the heartbreaking Hambird song, which I believe was made famous by the Military Wives Choir, Try Again, and the closing track, The Frog Prince, which was written about someone rather famous. The rumour mill suggests that it was written for or about Johnny Burrell, who was the singer of Razorlight, who is the singer of Razorlight, sorry. However, if like me, you weren't particularly keen on this album when it came out, and you haven't really revisited since, or you've been a long time since you've listened to it, please listen back to it. You won't regret it. Hopes and Fears. Okay, so you've made it to number one, and there is, of course, only hopes and fears left. I haven't written a script for this bit. I thought I would go completely unhinged and with unbridled joy as to how much I love this album. This was the album that first got me into the band, as it did with pretty much every other Keane fan, with Somewhere Only We Know, Everybody's Changing being mainstays on the radio, and they're still played regularly on sort of news stations like Radio 2 and other radio stations that devote to sort of older music. Which, I mean, if you listen to the album, you can understand why it's just held in such high esteem. It's anthemic, it's epic, it is just massive sounding. The band are really on top of their game here. I mean, for a debut, it is one of the strongest albums that I know of personally that a band has released as a debut. It's just a classic album from back to front, even with the singles that everybody knows. Some only we know, everybody's changing. There are just so many more songs on it which just don't get enough credit. You've got one of probably my favourite Keane song ever, Bend and Break. You've got Your Eyes Open, which takes things down a bit with its sort of slightly darker sound. Can't Stop Now, which I don't know how that wasn't a single. It's a cacophony of piano, and that opening floor tom flam, it just gets you going. When I saw Keane on their Hopes and Fears tour, they actually opened with that track, and I think everybody lost their absolute minds when it came to doing that. And then you've got the song after that song, Sunshine, which they've never released anything quite like that before or since. It remains one of my favourite Keane songs as well. And then This Is the Last Time, which I feel was probably one of their best singles that they've ever released. It's out of all their singles, it's probably the one I come back to the most. I remember seeing the video of it where they're performing on the train, and it's a great video. I love it. And then, of course, the other single from the album, the absolutely outstanding Bed Shaped, with the video with the little imp trying to escape a nightmare. You've got that little sort of synth lead solo, which just makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I listen to it. I cannot speak highly enough of this album. It is one of my most important albums in my collection, and as such, it is probably in my top 5 albums of all time. That being said, there are a couple of weak spots. The back half of On a Day Like Today, I feel, just sort of drags on a little bit, and I'm not really too much of a fan of Untitled Number 1. But it is a nice little, that song is a nice little departure from the sort of more piano-oriented songs. That one has more of like the moods and ambience that would probably feature a little bit more on Under the Iron Sea. So yeah, it was an easy decision to put this album as number 1. I would probably say that pretty much every other Keane fan would have put this album at number 1 as well, but I wasn't going to lie to you guys. It's just such a good album. I love it so much. I wouldn't be without it. So, yeah, there you have it. My Keane tier list. And thank you very much for sticking around, and I hope you have a brilliant day. You take care.